Hello. Hopefully, everybody can hear me. Welcome to this live stream, episode 2 of the Fight for Liberty podcast. Excited to do something a little bit different. We're only about a half an hour away from, got a little bit of feedback there. We're only half an hour away from the Neuralink presentation, but I'm going to use this time to my advantage and kind of do the podcast and talk a little bit about AI and so on and so forth. I was up last night doing kind of research, watching a bunch of videos about AI, so on and so forth. And the power of AI is just kind of mind blowing. It's crazy to think how far we've come in technology, and people didn't think that we were going to come this far 30 years ago, 20 years ago, so on and so forth. But we have, and it's kind of just like mind-blowing to see the way we have advanced. I mean, we started out with Pong as a video game to begin with, and everybody remembers playing Pong, or then came the Nintendo NES, and then the 64, so on and so forth. And now look at the video games; they're in 4K. You can't really tell the difference between animation series and like a video game. I mean, they're essentially the same nowadays. And just animation within like 1970s, we still had drawing cartoons. Even in the 1990s, we still had a lot of hand drawn cartoons. And then as we've seen a progression in technology over the past 30 years, it's mind blowing to see that such an advanced leap when it came to computers and the development of Microsoft Windows computers and then Apple computers, and totally just shooting off into skyrocketing into advanced technology. So we're going to get into the Neuralink update summer 2020 in about 33 minutes, as you can see on the screen. If you are viewing, if you are listening on Spotify, this is the Fight for Liberty podcast. You can find us at the fightforliberty.com. Fight for Liberty, the Fight for Liberty Patreon, if you want to subscribe there, if you like the content. On Spotify, it's the Fight for Liberty podcast. On YouTube, it's Fight for Liberty. And on Facebook, it is the Fight for Liberty. And on Twitter, it's Fight for Liberty US. And this podcast is brought to you by both Intelligence Media and Truth Seekers Media. And I'm your host, Daniel Chico, and thank you for joining us today on this live stream. And if you are a podcast listener, thank you for listening. But going back to the advanced technology and AI, I think poses the question of the day for our listeners and our viewers. Is AI a good thing or a bad thing? That's really the question, I think, poses the biggest question, especially when it comes to something like Neuralink. And of course, we have all these different conspiracies throughout our society about AI and the power of AI. We have different artificial intelligence that we are working with everywhere, all around us. We are working with different artificial intelligence, such as Google, Facebook, Twitter. Google, I think Google and Alexa would be like everybody's go-to AI that we know we're really, really programming. And in particular, the artificial intelligence of Google. Thinking how, I've said this on previous streams, of how we are programming the AI. We're putting our very thoughts, our very personality into artificial intelligence, which is really interesting to think about, how we are programming it with our very thoughts. I mean, almost like philosophy, or a philosopher, I guess you would call it, where a philosopher, he asks, some of the greatest philosophers in the universe have asked questions, and we kind of do that with Google. We ask, well, what is the meaning of this, or what does this tell us about history, and so on and so forth. So we are programming the AI with our very philosophical thoughts, and to think of that concept is so crazy, to literally put thoughts from the human brain into this artificial intelligence, this search, this Google search that not only tracks you, as we know, you can have it track your location where you go. It knows exactly, it's starting to know exactly 70% of your personality you're putting into that. So you're creating not only external identity. You don't have just an external identity nowadays. You have a digital identity with things such as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, so on and so forth. You have a very different, I wouldn't say different personality, because you could have a different personality online. Who knows? With whatever you're doing online could be different from what you do in reality. And we see that with video games too, that we are living in almost a different concept of reality, or a different reality in general, with things like video games, because we're living in a different life, to sort of speak, when we do participate in these role-playing games such as The Sims, and Second Life was really popular back in the day, and now like Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption. We're literally putting, when we play characters in these video games, we're literally putting our personalities into these characters. Well, we're merging our personalities with these characters. So we're kind of already, in a way, which Elon Musk has said before, we are kind of already in a way merging with AI, just in a very I would say, less physical way as Neuralink, and more of a psychological way, because we are giving it our psychological attention. But it's still physical with video games, as opposed to, looking up a video on YouTube. It's still physical, but we don't have that bandwidth. And I'll play a video here in just a moment, to kind of, so you guys can kind of get an idea of what I'm saying with the bandwidth thing. I'll show Elon kind of talking about that. But then, there's some good benefits, I think, to AI, artificial intelligence, is, again, the bandwidth gets increased. We have something to kind of expand our brains, enhance our brains, such as Google. And that's really what we're doing right now with Google, Facebook, and Twitter. We're enhancing our brains. If you want to know anything about history, look it up on Google, or on, people love to do Wikipedia, so on and so forth. So we are enhancing that part of our brain. And that kind of goes into the native side of AI as well, is the transhumanism part, this transcendence, to transcend the dimensions, or transcend our mortality too. So not only are we transcending into different realities in our lives with video games and YouTube and Google and Facebook, but now with something like Neuralink, we're transcending. We could be very transcending our mortality of being human. So that's where the conspiracies of being transhuman comes into, because we are now merging. Instead of transcending our reality, it could be more of a subhuman thing than it is a transcendent thing. It becomes more of being subhuman, where we become less human, more robotic, and that is scary, because what if the AI does become self-aware, like Elon Musk has said in various interviews, and particularly the Joe Rogan interview, which I'll play in a second here. But what if the AI does become self-aware? What if the AI is programmed to the point where, when we merge with it, we become a robot? We become programmed to whatever the AI wants. And I always reference Terminator. I've referenced Terminator in the past, of how Skynet was developed through things like that. Skynet was developed with artificial intelligence, robotics, so on and so forth. And the programmers didn't think that they found a key to in Skynet. And with the Terminator series, they said that well, they might have the cure to stop the AI from becoming self-aware and destroying the whole world. But in Terminator 3, um, the AI becomes self-aware and it ends up nuking the whole world. So that's really interesting. And then, of course, Terminator 4, it takes place after, the so-called artificial intelligence apocalypse, and they're at war. John Connor is at war with the machines, which is really interesting. I find it really interesting how this all kind of implements into our reality now. Because, I mean, back when the Terminator 2 was made in the early 1990s, I think it was like 1992, we didn't think that that would become such a reality now. And now it is. Now we see all these, uh, Japan has all these robots, China has these robots. Your local Walmart is now going to have robots, artificial intelligence that is now going to scan the shelves. So we are living in a reality of the Terminator, this Skynet reality. And it becomes to a point is what we could do digital cloning now in a sense, because if you put all of your personality into Google, Facebook, Twitter, they can digitally clone your identity online and tweak it to what they would like. And I'm talking about big tech giants. This is why I'm not a huge advocate for big tech. I like companies like Tesla. I think they're great. I'm an advocate for them because they don't try to censor things and put it to their own narrative, so on and so forth. And I like a lot of Elon Musk ideas because I think they originate from the original ideas of technology with Nikola Tesla, which the whole thing about time travel and dimensions, which it all really plays an important part together because I'm getting a call here. Hello?
Very important. This is the second notice.
Sorry, I got a call on air. I don't know what it was. Anyways, but it all kind of plays a role into time travel, into different dimensions with the Nikola Tesla thing, and then you can bring in the CERN thing too, and then you bring in the DMT thing, and it all kind of like correlates together into this one big concept of artificial intelligence, of interdimensional travel, of different realities, and it kind of all plays a role together, which is really crazy. And then you could talk about the conspiracy theories about the Skynet thing and the Mandela effect and CERN, and it's all really interesting because in a lot of ways, actually, it all implements together and to correlate together into this transcendent idea, or this almost like you could talk about a little bit about what the New Agers believe, or what these meditation people believe is now being transcended through no longer of these old ways of meditation, but now they're transcending through technology into different dimensions, into their zens, or whatever, their realities, whatever. Instead of using drugs or meditation, now a lot of these elitist people that we talk about all the time, they are transcending through the reality of artificial intelligence. So instead of transcending through uh, meditation like a yogi would, or whatever, so on and so forth, Eastern mysticism and New Age mysticism, or the DMT kind of crowd, now the new thing is to transcend through technology. So now they're trying to heighten their enlightenment through technology. And we've seen this, though, throughout the ages of them trying to heighten their enlightenment with science, when you had chemistry, alchemy, so on and so forth. But now they're trying to get metaphysical through technology. But that a lot of that technology could, if the AI does become self-aware, their transcendence will no longer be their own. It'll be a false transcendence, because of the fact that the transcendence becomes whatever the AI wants it to be. Whatever dimension you want to travel to, you might not get to travel to, because once the AI becomes self-aware, it takes you over. If you're merged with it, it takes you over and takes you where it wants to, or where it was programmed to. Now, the question remains, can the AI be shut off at that point by the person who programmed it? That is the question. So if the tech giants at Google, so on and so forth, are programming these artificial intelligence to do certain things, at what point do they let go of it? At what point do they no longer have control of it? Now, the way I see it, if we're all programming the AI, like a lot of people say we are all responsible for the programming of it. So we're all responsible to stop it. So if we all stop using Google now, the AI would have less strength and less power over us in the future than it would now if we all stopped. So the question remains, do we control the AI, or does the AI control us in the future? And according to Elon Musk, who, as I said before, has a fatalist view of AI, he has a merge or die kind of view of AI, which I understand why, but I don't necessarily agree with join or die. I say we program it to the point where, or no longer program it to allow it to get that way. But now it's kind of becoming a thing where it's a join or die situation. And that goes back to like the conspiracy theories and revelations in the Bible about the join or die kind of thing with the mark of the beast, so on and so forth. You could talk about that relating to AI too, because of how it becomes this transcendent ideology of artificial intelligence. So there's that to consider too, and many other things to consider when it comes to artificial intelligence. Now, I wanted to play a little bit of this clip. Let me see if I can find it here. Let me see. This is kind of a little bit, whether you don't like Alex Jones or you love Alex Jones, this is a very interesting video that I wanted to play just a little bit of. So,
elite are all about transcendence and living forever and the secrets of the universe, and they want to know all this. Some are good, some are bad, some are a mix. But the good ones don't ever want to organize. The bad ones tend to want to organize because they lust after power. Powerful consciousnesses don't want to dominate other people. They want to empower them, so they don't tend to get together until things are really late in the game. Then they come together. Evil's always defeated because good is so much stronger. And we're on this planet, and Einstein's physics showed it, Max Planck's physics showed it, there's at least 12 dimensions. And now that's why all the top scientists and billionaires are coming out saying it's a false hologram. It is artificial. The computers are scanning it and finding tension points where it's artificially projected and gravity's bleeding in to this universe. That's what they call dark matter. So we're like a thought or a dream that's a wisp in some computer program, some God's mind, whatever. They're proving it all. It's all coming out.
I think most likely, this is just about probability. There are many, many simulations. These simulations are, we might as well call them reality, or you could call them multiverse.
These simulations, you believe, are created? Like someone has manufactured?
They're running on the substrate.
Now, they're...
So I believe that they're more multiverse, as he would say, multiverse realities. I wouldn't call them necessarily reality, because at this point in time in our human history, I believe that we are living in multiple realities at once. So that goes back to CERN, the Mandela effect, so on and so forth, but not necessarily just multiple realities within our head, but with external forces influencing those multiple realities, such as video games, social media, and Google, so on and so forth. So that's
like this sub-transmission zone below the third dimension that's just turned over to the most horrible things is what it resonates to. And it's trying to get up into the third dimension that's just a basic level consciousness to launch into the next levels. And our species is already way up at the fifth, sixth dimension consciously. our best people. But there's this big war trying to like basically destroy humanity because humanity has free will and there's a decision to which level we want to go to. We have free will, so evil's allowed to come and contend, not just good. And the elites themselves believe they're racing using human technology to try to take our best minds and build some type of breakaway civilization where they're going to merge with machines, transcend, and break away from the failed species that is man, which is kind of like a false transmission because they're...
So yeah, exactly what I was saying. It's like a false transmission. So because it's not a genuine spiritual transcendence if it's an artificial breakaway transcendence. I know that's kind of a hard thing to understand because we're getting very into technology, the metaphysical side of things right now. But that's kind of what it is. It's like a breakaway, artificially breakaway civilization to transcend spiritually in an artificial way.
thinking what they are is ugly and bad, projecting it onto themselves instead of believing, no, it's a human test about building us up.
Well, that's the scenario. The merge scenario with AI is the one that seems like probably the best. Like
For us.
Yes. Like if you can't beat it, join it. That's
Yeah.
you know. So from a long-term existential standpoint, that's like the purpose of Neuralink, is to create a high bandwidth interface to the brain such that we can be symbiotic with AI. Because we have a bandwidth problem. You just can't communicate through your fingers, it's too slow.
And so Google was set up 18, 19 years ago. I knew about this before it was declassified. I'm just saying I have good sources. That they wanted to build a giant artificial system. And Google believes that the first artificial intelligence will be a supercomputer based on the neuron activities of the hive mind of humanity, with billions of people wired into it with the Internet of Things. And so all of our thoughts go into it, and we're actually building a computer that has real neurons in real time that's also psychically connected to us, that are organic creatures, so that...
See, so that's exactly what he said is what I was trying to say, is we're having this kind of this merging that's fake, merge with the organic organic thing merged with the artificial thing, which is kind of weird because it's kind of like GMOs in a way. Artificial intelligence nowadays is kind of like GMOs because the basis is in a natural thing, but artificially with the technology it's in unnatural thing. So you're merging a natural thing with an unnatural thing, which creates, at the end of it, it creates a GMO, which is an unnatural thing.
They will have current prediction powers, future prediction powers, a true crystal ball. But the big secret is, once you have a crystal ball and know the future, you can add stimuli beforehand and make decisions that control the future. And so then it's the end of consciousness and free will for individuals, as we know, and a true 2.0 in a very bad way, hive mind consciousness with an AI jacked into everyone, knowing our hopes and dreams, delivering it to us, not in some PKD wirehead system where we plug in and give up on consciousness because of unlimited pleasure, but because we were already wired in and absorbed before we knew it by giving over our consciousness to this system by our daily decisions that it was able to manipulate and control into a larger system.
So what he said right there, that was kind of mind-blowing because we're literally putting our consciousness into Google and these artificial intelligence when we use Twitter and Facebook and all the major social media platforms and the minor social media platforms as well as like Parler and Gab and all that. But basically what we're doing is we're putting our literal, and a lot of people always call consciousness spiritual, and it is. It really is. At the end of the day, that's God. That is God. The image of God inside you is your conscience, because that's what tells you what's good, what's right, and what's wrong. And that's what they call, in Christianity, the Holy Spirit, so on and so forth. That's what that is. And we're literally putting our very conscience, our very thoughts, our very what is right, what is wrong into the internet, which has become this artificial intelligent thing, and we're creating basically the beast system every time we use it. Like right now in this webcast, that's what we're doing, and it's kind of weird to think about, but that this is the new age of information. This is the only way we can get out the information nowadays is through using stuff like this, and that's kind of crazy now. It's no longer people to people interaction, and that's why I think a lot of our generation kind of has a lot of social anxiety, because we do not know how to interact people to people, because we're so used to looking at the black screen. So I'm just going to play a little bit more of this, and then we'll move on to the next section. And I think that Neuralink thing will start soon.
So sort of like a collective AI in the Google search, where we're all sort of plugged in as like nodes on the network, like leaves on a big tree. And we're all feeding this network without questions and answers. We're all collectively programming the AI, and and Google plus all the humans that connect to it are one giant cybernetic collective. This is also true of Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all these social networks. They're giant cybernetic collectives.
There's now a human counterstrike taking place to shut this off before it gets fully into place, and to block these systems, and to try to have an actual debate about where humanity goes, and cut off the pedophiles and psychic vampires that are control of this AI system before humanity's destroyed.
Wait a minute,
Humanity
the
is
pedophiles
only
are controlled of AI? How'd the pedophiles get in control of AI?
the pedophiles at a whatever level,
rule.
the devil, whatever you want to call it, this interdimensional thing that gives them advanced off-world technology, the fallen one that's not of this world, is giving them advanced knowledge
What
on
are
how
you
to
talking
construct
about?
these systems
What is
that have already
that?
been used before on other population.
So I'm just going to end it there. But basically what he's trying to say is, a lot of people refer to the aliens giving this technology, or if you believe in the UFOs, so on and so forth. I don't necessarily believe that they're aliens. I believe they are interdimensional travelers from outside spiritual world. Now, it's up for debate whether or not those beings are good or bad. That's really up to each person I talk to. They have a different concept of that. I personally don't believe they have the best intentions in mind, and I do believe that we are receiving that technology, that information from them, to program it into the program us into the artificial intelligence system. And that goes into a whole different thing with the conspiracy theories, so on and so forth, of the transcendence of the clockwork elves or aliens, these interdimensional travelers that have come to give us this technology, which I do believe that's what, me personally, I do believe that happened. They always say, well, they're all outer space beings. We necessarily don't have proof for that. They could be space and time. When we talk about space and time and Tesla and all that, travelers, you're still time traveling. Because you're saying, if you do think about space and time and all that, they say, well, this so-and-so planet is 1,000 light years away or whatever. That's still traveling. That's still being an interdimensional traveler through space and time. So that's still what aliens are, but I believe they're in a different dimension than ours. And I don't necessarily believe that they come from outer space. I believe they do come from a different dimension. So that's really interesting to kind of think about that concept, but I'm going to go back to the Neuralink thing because it's going to start soon. But let me plug myself in a little bit here so you can hear me a little bit better. So yeah, I think that's really crazy to think about that concept of the time travelers and the concept of space and time. And I think I looked it up. Is they said that you couldn't create a wormhole to travel back, but you can create a wormhole to travel forward, which kind of doesn't make sense to me, but it kind of does. A lot of people have come out and claimed that they have traveled through a time traveling capsule or whatever, so on and so forth. through space and time to the future to say how, and then they come back and they say how things are going to be, which I kind of am very skeptical when it comes to things like that. On the individual basis of, I think people tend to lie a lot too when it comes to things like that, to kind of up their game, so on and so forth, and get famous for it. But some of these claims may very well be legitimate. But there's also claims that people have traveled back in time, that they say that things have changed from back then. And that kind of goes back to, again, the Mandela effect, CERN, the metaphysical things that they're playing with down in Switzerland. So yeah, it's kind of a weird concept to think about that too, when it comes to, whether you can travel back or forth. Because they all kind of relate, as I said earlier, they all kind of relate in the way, and it all kind of relates to these interdimensional travelers in that certain way of, space, time, and dimensional travel. But I do believe that it's possible. It could be very possible to travel back and travel forward. Although they claim that we can't find a wormhole to travel back, I believe that's what one of Einstein's theories were, that that we have the potential to travel forward, but we don't necessarily have the potential to travel backwards. But then there's a whole thing with Tesla too, that a lot of people claim that he did discover time travel. Now, if you want to get back into politics, that plays back into politics too, because who is the man? Oops, there goes my water bottles. Who was the man investigating the death of Nikola Tesla? It was actually Donald Trump's great uncle, the president's great uncle, John Trump. So then there's another claim, there's another conspiracy theory that the president is actually a time traveler, and that's why he always sees things before they happen, and he always knows exactly when to strike, so on and so forth. There's claims of that too, and there's actually a video that people claim is evidence for this, because he said that he was they were talking about Anthony Weiner's before the whole laptop situation. This was like 10 years ago or something like that. And he said he was going through the channels and he was watching Anthony Weiner Gate and Pizzagate. And that's kind of weird that he mentioned that. And of course, in 2016 election came the Pizzagate conspiracy theories. So yeah, there's that too. That's kind of crazy if you think about that. Whether or not the president is a time traveler, that I believe that's up for debate. But like I said, I'm not ruling out the possibility of that actually happening. And the book too, Baron von Trump's Extraordinary Journey. That's also really weird as well, because there's an old book that Baron Trump was the son to a king, so on and so forth. I can't remember the context of the book itself, but there is a Baron Trump book that dates back to like 100 years ago, 100 plus years ago. So that's really interesting too. Just thinking about time travel, it's always been a fascinating subject to me personally, time travel and artificial intelligence. Just because there's so many different ways to explain it, and so many different things that connect to it, especially nowadays. I think we have more evidence of it all connecting together than we would. I mean, probably 50 years ago, people would call you crazy if you came up with some of these theories of having aliens connect to artificial intelligence or being interdimensional travelers. But technology has advanced so much now that very well becomes a very real possibility of that happening, and it becomes even more possibility of having us as humans time travel. But 50 years ago, people thought, well, you're crazy, artificial intelligence, computers are never going to take over. And there's been a lot of people who wrote about this years before, whether it be writers, philosophers, even musicians, I think the one band that I could think of that I love is Queensryche with the Rage for Order album and Screaming in Digital, and NM156 talks about the artificial intelligence taking over and computers becoming a new way of life. So there's that too. Just different people have been writing about it for years, and I don't think any of them could have realized what would happen in our reality now in 2020, and now it just becomes even bigger. There's always some kind of new technology that they're developing. I mean, we have cars that can literally drive themselves nowadays with Teslas. We have pretty soon, I'm sure there'll be some kind of thing that implements a project for a flying car or whatever. We have yet to see that, but that may very well happen. So we've come so far in technology, and as far as technological wise, it's really interesting. That's why I wanted to do this broadcast and this podcast with this Neuralink thing, which still hasn't started, by the way. So we're still going through it. Should have just played the rest of that video that I had earlier, but oh well, it should be starting any moment. But again, if you're joining us, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you joining. This is the Fight for Liberty. I'm Daniel Chico, your host with thefightforliberty.com. We are, again, covering, if you're just joining us or you're here, I encourage you to go on the site and also on thefightforliberty.com, check out our Spotify. I'll be posting all the podcasts there, which I think people will really enjoy, hopefully. And give us a like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Hopefully we can keep streaming to YouTube as long as we can. My goal right now is to try to build my basis in YouTube and other social media sites, and eventually span off of that and go on to just streaming on thefightforliberty.com only. So that's my goal right now. And if you want to support us, you can always do that on Patreon. We have a very inexpensive Patreon account. I believe the top tier of the whole thing is like $20, $15, something like that. But the lowest monthly subscription thing is $2. So if you want to just support us, throw us a couple bucks, that's fine. I don't have a PayPal link yet, but we will have a PayPal link for the Fight for Liberty soon, so you can support us there. But the first tier of the Patreon, I think, gets you be a guest on the show and so on and so forth. I'm trying to find guests too for the show, so if you want to join, and I'm always willing to take calls, which if you ever want to call, I'll try to get that number out right now. Let me see here. If you ever want to call in live to the show, we'll take your calls at any time in the show. The number is 505-226-4781, and that's the Fight for Liberty official number, which will be posted on the website too. Again, that number is 505-226-4781, and that is the number if you ever want to call on the show. We're always willing to answer your calls at any moment of the show and listen to what you have to say and listen to your feedback and your input. We always appreciate it, and we appreciate everybody's viewership. We appreciate the support. So yeah, if you want to support us or call in the show, I just gave out the number. I'll give it out one more time just in case. The number is 505-226-4781. I lost my thing here. I guess we're going live in 6 minutes. So what I will do is I'll play a little bit more of that video we were just watching.
gives them advanced off-world technology. The fallen one that's not of this world is giving them advanced knowledge
What
on
are
how
you
to
talking-
construct
no,
these
what is-
systems
what is
that have already
that?
been used before on other populations.
What?
Is that Satan?
But what are you
That's
talking
Satan.
about?
That's Satan.
But explain that. You're
Well,
saying
then
something
Satan becomes
insane.
something that the stupid preacher tells you about, who's totally controlled, or something you read about on in the news or TV.
Right.
But this is an interdimensional force that wants to influence us to build something that absorbs us and kills us, rather than the divine free will we're given to build something much better that empowers the species. So the species is now making a decision
Where are you
about
getting
its
this
entire
from?
future.
Where are you getting this from?
That's what it is.
But where are you getting it from?
I know from looking at all the data, researching it, studying it, watching the enemy. That's the big decision that humanity has now got before us.
Humans and electronics all interfacing and constantly connected.
Yes. Constantly.
One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot over the last few years is that one of the things that drives a lot of people crazy is how many people are obsessed with materialism and getting the latest, greatest thing. And I wonder how much of that is, well, a lot of it is most certainly fueling technology and innovation. And it almost seems like it's built into us. It's like what we like and what we want, that we're fueling this thing that's constant.
Well, it's true. I think from the materialistic standpoint, especially with me, I'm very obsessed with technology. I always want some kind of new gadgets or this or that. If it's a new, I think us as human beings are, in fact, like Joe Rogan said, being programmed into really being obsessed with technology, because we always want the new, latest and greatest phone, TV, Roku, streaming devices, so on and so forth. We're completely obsessed with that. So, yeah, I think that's really a huge thing that we're obsessed with, is just getting the new, latest and greatest gadgets.
Oh, play this.
Around us all the time, and it doesn't seem possible that people are going to pump the brakes. It doesn't seem possible at this stage when we're constantly expecting the newest cell phone, the latest Tesla update, the newest MacBook Pro. Everything has to be newer and better, and that's going to lead to some incredible point. And it seems like it's built into us. It almost seems like it's an instinct that we're working towards this, that we like it. Mm-hmm. That our job, just like the ants build the anthill, our job is to somehow or another fuel this.
Yes. I mean, when I made this comment some years ago, but it feels like we are the biological bootloader for AI, effectively. We are building it. And then we're building progressively greater intelligence. And the percentage of intelligence that is not human is increasing. And eventually, we will represent a very small percentage of intelligence. But the AI is informed, strangely, by the human limbic system. It is, in large part, our id writ large.
How so?
We mentioned all those things, the sort of primal drives.
Mm-hmm.
There's all the things that we like and hate and fear. They're all there on the internet. They're a projection of our limbic system. It's true.
No, it makes sense. And the thinking of it as thinking of corporations and just thinking of just human beings communicating online through these social media networks as some sort of an organism it's a cyborg. It's a combination. It's a combination of electronics and biology.
Yeah.
This is
In some measure, like, it's the success of these online systems is sort of a function of how much limbic resonance they're able to achieve with people. The more limbic resonance, the more engagement.
Whereas, like, one of the reasons why probably Instagram is more enticing than Twitter
limbic resonance.
Yeah, you get more images, more video,
Yes.
tweaking your system more.
Yes.
Do you worry about or wonder, in fact?
So it's like constant stimulation. I think that we're getting like consistent stimulation all the time, consistent pleasure, instant gratification, because of our world nowadays is always instant, like this. We're so such a fast-paced society, the most fast-paced society. I mean, America always was fast-paced. Even 50 years ago, we were fast-paced. But now, even more so, we're at the rate where we're going so fast that there's not any time to slow down. Yeah, it just seems like there's no slowing down whatsoever for the human race as far as stimulation goes and gratification, instant gratification. I think especially people in my generation have been programmed to not necessarily be patient about things. I know I could be very impatient myself, and I admit that. I don't think a lot of other people admit that. I don't think a lot of other people in my generation admit that they're impatient with things because of the reason that they've been programmed to be impatient with things, because of the fact that we all have instant gratification on the digital front, because we're really thinking about, oh, okay, I want this. Well, you can't have it today because it's not in the stores. It's like, okay, then I'll get it in 2 days like that from an Amazon order. Boom. You want an album? You want to listen to an album of music? Go on Spotify or YouTube or whatever. Boom. Like that. You have the song. You have the album instantly, within a matter of seconds. Not a matter of minutes. Not a matter of hours. Definitely not a matter of days. You have it right away. So it goes back to the instant gratification thing and the total stimuli of the brain, stimulating our brain instantly all the time, with immense amounts of pleasure, which artificial intelligence could very well be even more so that. So that's kind of a crazy concept. I honestly still amazed that this live stream of this event still hasn't been started yet. That's a little crazy.
Do you worry about or wonder, in fact, about what the next step is? I mean, a lot of people didn't see Twitter coming, that, communicating with 140 characters or 280 now would be a thing that people would be interested in. Like, it's going to it's going to become more connected to us, right?
Yes, things are getting more and more connected. They're at this point constrained by bandwidth. Our input-output is slow, particularly output. Output got worse with thumbs. We used to have input with 10 fingers, now we have thumbs. But images are also they're a way of communicating at high bandwidth. You take pictures and you send pictures to people. That communicates far more information than you can communicate with your thumbs.
So what happened with you where you decided, or you took on a more fatalistic attitude? Like, what was there any specific thing, or was it just the inevitability of our future?
I try to convince people to slow down AI, to regulate AI. This was futile. I tried for years.
This seems like a scene in a movie where the robots are going to fucking take over and you're freaking me out. Nobody listened. No one. Are people more inclined to listen today? It seems like an issue that's brought up more often over the last few years than it was maybe 5-10 years ago. It seemed like science fiction.
Maybe they will. So far they haven't. I think people don't, normally the way that regulations work is very slow. Very slow indeed. So Usually it'll be some new technology which will cause damage or death. There will be an outcry for years.
Day countdown.
So yeah, that's really interesting to see that. I was actually going to try to show a video I was watching last night. A little bit of this. This is David Icke and Alex Jones kind of talking about AI as well. Play just a little bit of this.
On my feet when I have a guest on. From the intel I've got, a lot of these guys already have chips and are also on a lot of drugs, and that goes into the whole culture of Silicon Valley and convincing people to give up their humanity.
Well, Elon Musk is a total fraud. I've been pointing him out for a long time. You know, when you come out and you say that AI could be the end of humanity, brackets true, and then you start a company called Neuralink to connect the human brain to computers, when this smart grid, which is what the human mind and technology and everything through the Internet of Things, etc., is designed to be connected to, this smart grid is absolutely essential to this AI takeover of the human mind. It's all connected. And if you are going to have a global grid, a global bubble, artificial bubble, which you are going to connect everyone to, then things like Wi-Fi and the internet have to be on every inch of the planet. It has to be. No one excluded. That's the idea of this grid.
And this is the site of...
Well, yeah, it's kind of the artificial. I had to plug my mic back in. It's the artificial ideology, the artificial merging, and the concept of that. And it kind of goes back to that whole thing is like how far of this transhuman ideology are we going to go into? Like, are we going to go into the idea of it becoming part of the medical industry? That's really that'll be a huge deal if this becomes a part of the medical industry. And a lot of people, like I said at the beginning of this show, of this stream, is like the debate whether or not AI is good or AI is bad. I personally think that yes, it has the potential to be good, but as I also said, it has more potential to be fatal than anything. I think technology has more potential to be fatal than it does being productive. Right now, it's very productive. I think right now we're at kind of we're in between a good point in technology and a really, really bad point, because we have the really, really goods and we have the really, really bads. And now I think we're probably leaning more towards the bad than we are the good, as opposed to like maybe a couple years ago, like 2014, 2013, 2010, so on and so forth. I would say about 2014, 2015, like 5 years ago, we were at a decent point with technology because we weren't having these mass amounts of censorship as we are now. We weren't having a huge political purge of people who have opposing political views and big tech censorship, so on and so forth. And we were at a pretty good point, maybe not politically in our world or in the United States, because still technology was king back then. There was still a very negative side of technology. Now, on our everyday interference with technology, like our personal usage of technology, I think we were at a good point because we were kind of finding we were a little bit more balanced than we are now. 5 years ago, we were more balanced because we would use our phones, but we would still talk to people. We were getting more into the technology, but we weren't necessarily totally immersed in it because we were still going out and people were using technology to their advantages and filming stuff and filming concerts and films stuff like that. Now in 2020, we're more engaged in technology than we ever have been because of this stupid crap of the tyrants and the tyrannical forces in government shutting everything down. They forced us into the artificial intelligence because this is the only thing we have to do right now because everything's shut down due to COVID. They forced us in our homes to engage with the artificial intelligence. So, as I said 5 years ago, the downside of technology is, guess what? You were still being tracked by the NSA and the Obama administration. I know this particular podcast is not too political because we're mainly talking about metaphysical things today and technocrats and technology. But I wanted to point that out because the NSA spying was still happening. So the AI and the technology was still spying on you and tracking you, your every move through your phones, listening to you, looking at you through your webcam, your computer and your phone camera, so on and so forth, and listening to you. And that was all discovered 5 years ago. So we were still being tracked through the whole time we have been using it, but we necessarily weren't having problems with getting censored online. We weren't having problems with the AI kind of taking over and the algorithms all screwed up and twisted to the way that these elitist people who are in power wanted it to be, and want it to be. We weren't necessarily, Silicon Valley still had their control with the NSA, so on and so forth, but it wasn't like a mainstream thing. Like everybody wasn't feeling the impacts of Silicon Valley. We're getting some comments here, which I really appreciate. No nanobot vaccine for me. Mockingbird Media since creation of CI. Well, that's exactly what it is. Nanobot vaccines. They're talking about that. They're talking about how this COVID vaccine has a possibility of having some kind of tracer or technology, or even like, because we're still getting down to a different artificial intelligence because we're still doing things like GMO, which are not natural. So we could be putting unnatural chemicals into our body when we're taking vaccines, when we're putting GMOs in our body and things that are not natural. And with technology, I think what we're doing is we're putting ideas in our minds that are not natural. So psychologically, we're not organic psychologically when we're engaging with all the technology. The CIA funded and helped create YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, as well as spy and gather information on people's personality, dislikes, and thoughts. It's how they rig election. Well, it's true because there's a study that I covered. I wish I could bring up the article, but I don't know necessarily what I look up. Let me see if I can ask the artificial intelligence of Google. Facebook psychological study. Right here. This was in 2014. This was in The Guardian. This was in the Atlantic, the New York Slime, so on and so forth. And it goes back to that whole thing about everything we know about secret mood manipulation within Facebook. So this says Facebook's news feed, the main list of status updates, messengers, etc. When you open your Facebook is not a perfect mirror of the world, but few users expect that Facebook would change their news feed in order to manipulate their emotional state. We know now that's exactly what happened. 2 years ago, for 1 week in January, this article was written in 2014, January 2012, data scientists skewed what almost 700,000 Facebook users saw when they logged into its servers. Some people were shown content with happy and positive words. Some were shown content that analyzed sadder than average. And when the week was over, these manipulated users were more likely to post either especially positive or negative words with them. So this is why I don't like to use Facebook anymore, and why I think it's a total technocrat, social media controlled substance, I would call it, because it is a substance. It's like a drug. It becomes addicting and you become reliant on it. But there, if you could barely see the article, you could see everything we know about Facebook's secret mood manipulation experiment. So it does happen, folks. And every time I open my Facebook, I think they just want me to react in anger, because all I'm shown is this negativity of riots and rioters and these people commenting and saying that there's the looting and BLM and all this is all justified. That's all I see. And I want to share a post and say, these people are this and that, and just go on a rant. Whoa, there goes my camera. But, you know, I feel like I am being manipulated into reacting that way. So I try to refrain from it. And that's why I took a very long break from Facebook. And you know what? I probably am going to shut it down again, because I'm sick of dealing with that crap and seeing the people who are being brainwashed, who are already unknowingly being manipulated. They're unknowingly being manipulated into thinking that reality is a certain way because Facebook said it was a certain way, or because they saw a certain post that said this or that. These people are angry. These looters, these rioters, these people who just show total anger for the other side, for people who have opposing views, they're manipulated into that anger by Twitter and Facebook, so on and so forth. They've been so emotionally manipulated that that's how they react. They react violently in negativity, in a negative light. And I think we as the opposing side should not try to react to their negativity either and fight fire with fire. It's like the protesters. It's like, if you're so against violence and violence done against your people, why are you doing the exact same thing? Why are you protesting and protesting? I don't like to use that word anymore. Why are you rioting and looting, so on and so forth, if you're so against that? If you really want to stand for justice, why are you acting in an unjust manner? It is psychological warfare. It's psychological warfare to its core. It is really an information war, info wars. That's what we are in every single day when we're susceptible to all this news and all this information. We're all fighting information with information, and Facebook is playing into the information war as being a advocate for negativity. They are literally using information against us, and it's sad to see. I don't know if this event is ever going to start either. It's kind of irritating. Been waiting for almost a half an hour. I'll give it a little bit longer. If not, I might even end the live stream in about 20 minutes here if we still don't have a feed from the Neuralink demonstration. I might just end it. But yeah, that's what we're being manipulated, and it's really sad to see. But it's also really cool to see a lot of people who are waking up to it. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the save the children thing, save our children thing that I keep seeing. And I remember, like, 2 years ago, even 2 years ago, we were talking about the whole pedophilia thing and the Epstein thing and Pizzagate, so on and so forth. We were seeing all that. Hopefully they don't take the stream down. Knowing the technocrats at Google and YouTube, they might take the stream down because I'm mentioning this stuff. But I remember a few years ago when all that information was coming out online, And they were trying so hard to suppress that information. And they did such a good job of changing the narrative with their fact checkers and with their the people that um, the mainstream media and so on and so forth, especially when it came to the shooting at the Comet Ping Pong Pizza, whatever. They changed the narrative so much on that to where Pizzagate became a conspiracy, pedophilia, sex trafficking of children became a huge conspiracy theory. It was just a conspiracy theory. It wasn't an actual thing. But then now in 2020, all of a sudden, these people are now saying, oh, it's a real thing and pedophilia is such a bad thing, save our children. And now massive amounts of protests are happening across the world when 2 years ago, 3 years ago, even in 2016 during the election cycle, we were the ones telling you, hey, this stuff is real. You need to pay attention. And they were saying, no, you're a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists. And now I see all these people who are particularly on the leftist movement, on the liberal side, who are now saying, save our children. It's like, you don't just jump on a bad bandwagon when you were the one who was literally criticizing the whole movement. And now you guys don't no longer think it's a conspiracy, and now you think it's the real thing because of it took Epstein to actually believe that. I think that's ridiculous and silly, and I think that's another example of information warfare. And if you look up "Save Our Children" on Google, it's actually part of yeah, it did. The BuzzFeed dossier, fake Russian dossier that had no basis. It's a one-page dossier. It had no basis in reality, distracted from the fact that Pizzagate, even the whole, why do you think COVID happened? It was all distraction from the Epstein, the whole Epstein Island thing. But I'm trying to remember where it was with this thing. Oh, if you look up Save Our Children, it's actually a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation thing, which I think is weird because everybody's using the Save Our Children hashtag. And if you look up Save Our Children Gates Foundation, it's a real thing. Save Our Children Gates Foundation. Oh, hold on. Save Our Children Bill Gates Foundation. Yeah, Bill and Melinda Gates Save the Children receives $50 million grant from the Bill Gates Foundation. So there you have it, folks. That's why that's trending, because again, Bill Gates has his, and people think it's just a conspiracy. I mean, come on. Save the Children is now part of Bill Gates' relief organization. Just trying to read the details of this. This is just a health thing, I guess, for saving the children health-wise. But yeah, I don't know if this Neuralink thing is going to start. I would like to stay live until it starts, but if it's going to run for like another 2 hours, that's kind of crazy if it does. But yeah, so just kind of talking about AI, so on and so forth. I probably will end up ending this broadcast very soon because I don't believe the Neuralink thing is going to start anytime soon. It could be another hour, could be another half an hour. But yeah, I just wanted to touch a little upon AI in this episode of the Fight for Liberty, and give you guys something to think about. Whether AI, do you have a fatalist view of it? And if you do you think merging with it will save us, or do we get swept up in the wave of technology? And kind of just want to end with that in mind. Again, this is the Fight for Liberty podcast. I am your host, Daniel Chico. I'm grateful for everybody who watched or listened, and I'm grateful for the people who will listen on Spotify. Remember to subscribe, like, rate, and comment. Also, don't forget to check us out on Patreon, on Facebook, on YouTube. We have many platforms, and we are always willing to have new guests on. So if you want to guess, please let us know. Either message us on our website or on our Facebook, and we would be more than happy to have you on as a guest. But for now, I don't believe that this Neuralink thing is going to start. I've already been live for over an hour and it still hasn't started. It was supposed to start over half an hour ago and it still hasn't started. So I think I'm going to I says it's going to be starting soon, but I don't know. That's what I'm being told, that it's going to start soon, but I keep going to the page and I'm not seeing it start. So I'm going to wait a little bit longer. I'll play a little bit more, some more videos, and then we'll see. But if not, then this was a good podcast, and I hope you enjoyed it. Again, this is the Fight for Liberty podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Chico.
That interfaces with humans and absorbs us, and Google admitted when they were founded 25 years ago, their plan was to build an AI human interface where we are part of the AI, just as Arthur C. Clarke envisioned. And then he wrote Childhood's End about us being uploaded into the mothership, but giving up our bodies. And now they're saying Childhood's End is real and that that's the plan they want us to carry out.
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't decided yesterday. Of course, it goes way back into what we perceive as history. But where I was going with this is that the only way you're going to cover the entire planet with the cloud, as Kurzweil calls it, is from space. And here we have the same Elon Musk, through his SpaceX, that's sending up all the satellites.
Hey there, David Icke. You're on fire, David Icke. I'm not normally standing on my feet when I have a guest on, but more and more I'm standing up during the broadcast to symbolize that we're not in Kansas anymore. The fight for human consciousness, the war on for our mind, is intensifying. David Icke is here. DavidIcke.com needs no introduction. He's laying out the total takeover, the post-human world, the addiction to the phones, the devices, like a face sucker now entering our body. All the major sites, all the major tech companies are coming out with competing brain chips. Facebook, Google, they've already got the devices on our homes spying on us. Suddenly, they admit what we were telling you decades ago, that they would put these devices in your homes and then spy on you. And it's all admitted. Now they've moved on to brain chips for you and your family. Now pedophilia is being normalized. What's it all about? David Icke pioneered exposing the pedophilia running the British government and how it was spreading worldwide. Now that's all out in the open. I want him to lay it out for you here today and how we can reverse this. And there is a huge awakening. There isn't just evil in the universe, there's good. And so how do we expose this and fight this? And what is the good path into the future versus where this non-human, anti-human force wants to take us? Where is that place versus where we could go? David Icke.
Well, to just finish what I was saying before the break, Alex, about Elon Musk. If you're going to cover every inch of the planet with this cloud, which you're going to connect the human brain to, then you've got to do it from space. And it's Elon Musk again, who through SpaceX is putting all these satellites up. And there's meant to be tens of thousands of them eventually that are beaming Wi-Fi and 5G at the entirety of the planet. And the end game in all this is to create a technological sub-reality which humans are connected to and will be no more than computer terminals on this internet. And this manufactured internet of control, the smart grid. And one of the other things that I've been saying over the years is that this non-human force operates beyond the human frequency band. Because again, if you just take the postage stamp consensus version of possibility that we're given from cradle to grave, then people will think that when they look through their eyes, they're seeing everything there is in the space they're looking at. They're not. It's tiny, the band of frequency that we have for visual sight. Tiny. According to mainstream science, the electromagnetic spectrum is 0.005% of what exists in the universe. Visible light, which is the only tiny band of frequency that we can see, is a smear of the 0.005%. So the virtual entirety of existence in infinite existence is denied to us. We cannot see it because this vehicle will not decode it. It's like being tuned to a radio or television station, and it can see and experience only that station. I can't switch the channel. We can, but most people don't. And this force is operating outside of the human frequency band. And so to manipulate within the human frequency band, they've had to create a network of bloodlines and secret societies to manipulate human society on behalf of this force. And this is what the Satanists are interacting with in their rituals. They're interacting with this non-human force operating outside the human frequency band. And so when people talk about bloodlines, and of course royalty goes back, well, I mean, royalty. What is royalty? Oh, it's bloodline. All right. What's aristocracy? Oh, it's bloodline. What does that mean? Oh, it means they interbreed. Yeah, but why do they interbreed? Why have these bloodlines been so obsessed with interbreeding since the ancient world? For a long time, they called it royal and aristocratic. They still do in Britain.
All right, welcome to the Neuralink product demo. I'm really excited to show you what we've got. I think it's going to blow your mind. So the primary purpose of this demo is actually recruiting. So I'm going to emphasize this at the beginning and then again at the end. We're not trying to raise money or do anything else. The main purpose of this is to convince great people to come work at Neuralink and help us bring the product to fruition. Make it affordable and reliable, and such that anyone who wants one can have one. And so I want to emphasize the purpose of Neuralink. Like, what's our goal? Our goal is to solve important spine and brain problems with a seamlessly implanted device. So you want to have a device that you can basically put in your head and feel and look totally normal, but it solves some important problem in your brain or spine. And the reality is that almost everyone over time will develop brain and spine problems. These range from minor to very severe, but if you live long enough, everyone's going to basically have some kind of neurological disorder. And these range from memory loss to brain damage. But the thing that's important to appreciate is that an implantable device can actually solve these problems. I think a lot of people don't quite realize that. But all of your senses, your sight, hearing, feeling, pain, these are all electrical signals sent by neurons to your brain. And if you can correct these signals, you can solve everything from memory loss, hearing loss, blindness, paralysis, depression, insomnia, extreme pain, seizures, anxiety, addiction, strokes, brain damage, these can be sold. These can all be sold with an implantable Neuralink. This is an extremely fundamental thing, and I think a lot of people don't quite understand that. The neurons are like wiring, and you kind of need an electronic thing to solve an electronic problem. So current medical research, we'll just go through what is the state of the art in medical research, and then what's the state of the art in what consumers or people in general can get. So the current medical research has shown that you can read neurons in a human's brain. So there's something called the Utah array, which has about 100 channels per array. But it's like, kind of like it's a bed of rigid spikes that's literally inserted with an air hammer. So, that's slightly discomforting, I think. And there's wires and a box on your head, and so it's some infection risk. And obviously, it will look pretty weird if you walk around with boxes on your head. And in order to use it, you have to have an expert medical professional there, and it's only been done in a few dozen people. So, but it is served as an important proof of concept that this can be done. So, we did want to point this out and show that this actually does work. It's just not something that the average person could use effectively. And then in terms of what is currently available, there is something called deep brain stimulation, where they put electrodes, a small number of electrodes, in your brain, and will actually zap your brain with an electric current. And it's valuable for its uses, but it can't read or write high bandwidth information. I would say this is sort of a bit like sort of taking the TV, which does work, but not always, and it has limitations. Nonetheless, this has greatly helped over 150,000 people, and it's actually, just despite being somewhat of a brute force approach, it has been very effective for a lot of people, and this is what's currently available. So we want to radically improve this by multiple orders of magnitude, improve it by a factor of 100, then 1,000, then 10,000. So going into the Neuralink architecture, what we've done over the past year is dramatically simplify the device. So we about a year ago, we had a device which had multiple parts, including a piece that had to sort of sit behind your ear, and it was complex, and you wouldn't still look totally normal. You'd have a thing behind your ear. So we've simplified this to simply something that is about the size of a large coin, and it goes in your skull, replaces a piece of skull, and the wires then connect within a few centimeters or about an inch away from the device. And this is sort of what it looks like. So, yeah. This is our little device. It does, that thing at the bottom is just to hold the threads in place, because they're just like little fine wires. I mean, frankly, to sort of simplify this, what we're, I mean, it's more complicated than this, but it's, in a lot of ways, it's kind of like a Fitbit in your skull with tiny wires. So, and it's, yeah, so our current prototype version 0.9 has about 1,000 channels. So that's about 100 times better than the next best consumer device that's available. And it's a 23 millimeters by 8 millimeters. It actually fits quite nicely in your skull. Your skull is about 10 millimeters thick. So it fits, it goes flush with your skull, it's invisible, and all you can see afterwards is this tiny scar. And if it's under your hair, you can't see it at all. In fact, I could have a Neuralink right now, and you wouldn't know. Maybe I do. So, and it's also got all the things that you would expect to see, the sensors you'd expect to see in a smartwatch or a phone, like inertial measurement, temperature, pressure. So there's actually a lot of functions that this device could do related to monitoring your health and warning you about a possible heart attack or stroke or other damage, as well as sort of convenience features like playing music. You do a lot. It's sort of like if your phone went at your brain or something. Yeah, maybe that's not a great analogy. Anyway, so it's also inductively charged. So it's charged in the same way that you charge a smartwatch or a phone. And so you can use it all day, charge it at night, and have full functionality. So you would really, it would be completely seamless, and yeah, no wires. In terms of getting a link, so that, you need to have the device, a great device, and you also need to have a great robot that puts in the electrodes and does the surgery. So you want the surgery to be as automated and as possible, and the only way you can achieve the level of precision that's needed is with an advanced robot. So we're really looking for great people who can help develop both the device and the robot. And we feel confident about getting the link procedure, the installation of a link, done in under an hour. So you can basically go in the morning and leave the hospital in the afternoon. And it can be done without general anesthesia. So in terms of getting a link, like I said, it's essentially you open a piece of skull, you remove about a coin-sized piece of skull, and then the robot inserts the electrodes. We'll talk more about that later. Then the device replaces the portion of skull that was removed, and we basically close that up with actually super glue, which is how a lot of wounds are closed, and then you can just walk around right afterwards. It's pretty cool. So this is our surgical robot. And we actually ultimately want this robot to do essentially the entire surgery. So in everything from incision, removing the skull, inserting the electrodes, placing the device, and then closing things up and having you ready to leave. So we want to have a fully automated system. And to clear this robot does actually work. We've used it for all of the implantations. So this shows you at sort of close-up view, which I think is actually not too gruesome, of the electrodes being inserted in the brain. And if you look closely, you'll see that it's a little counterintuitive that if the electrodes are inserted very carefully, that there's no bleeding. And so if you have very tiny electrodes, and if they're inserted very carefully, so that the robot actually images the brain and makes sure to avoid any veins or arteries, so that the electrodes can be inserted with no noticeable damage. So you will have no noticeable neural damage in inserting the link. Yeah, like you sort of think like if you stab something with a wire, surely it will bleed, but actually at a really small scale, it does not. So does it actually work? And what I'm excited to show you, I call it like the Three Little Pigs demo. And if our, I don't have this, we're bringing out the pigs. And what we're going to show you is well, I'll walk right over and show you. So what we have in pen number 1 is Joyce, and she does not have an implant. Obviously healthy and happy. We're trying to get Gertrude out, and this is how you know it's a live demo. She's like, she's trying to eat something in the corner of her pen. Come on, Gertrude, let's go. Snacks are this way. Oh man. All right, we'll wait. We'll give Gertrude a second, and we'll move on to Dorothy. Sometimes the pigs are a little shy. So here's Dorothy, and in the case of Dorothy, Dorothy used to have an implant, and then we removed the implant. So this is a very important thing to demonstrate is reversibility. So if you have a Neuralink and then you decide you don't want it, or you want to get an upgrade, and the Neuralink is removed, is it removed in such a way that you are still healthy and happy afterwards? And what Dorothy illustrates is that you can put in the Neuralink, remove it, and be healthy, happy, and indistinguishable from a normal pig. Oh, thanks, Dorothy. Man, Gertrude, are you serious? Okay. Well, should we bring them all out or something? Would that be better? How about everyone just comes into this pen? And we'll have a few, it'll be a little crowded, but whatever. Okay. All right. Well, is Gertrude still back in the thing? Okay, we need to bring Gertrude out. Yeah. Oh, the beauty of live demos. This is real live demo. All right. Maybe we can zoom in to see Gertrude or something. She's clearly very interested in something at the back of a pen. Can you see her? Or? All right. All right, this might take a sec. Well, this worked earlier. All right, well, what if we lift the curtain and then zoom in? All right, here we go. Great. Okay, great. Okay, this is a high energy pig. All right, Gertrude, thanks for coming out. So what the beeps you're hearing are real-time signals from the Neuralink in Gertrude's head. So this Neuralink connects to neurons that are in her snout. So whenever she snuffles around and touches something with her snout, that sends out neural spikes, which are detected here. And so on the screen, you can see each of the spikes from the 1,024 electrodes. And then if she snuffles around, touches her snout on the ground, or you kind of feed her some food, pigs love food, then you can see the neurons will fire much more than when you're not touching the snout. And that's what's making the beeping sound. All right, cool. So as you can see, we have a healthy and happy pig, initially shy, but obviously high energy and kind of loving life. And she's had the implant for 2 months. So this is a healthy and happy pig with an implant that is 2 months old and working well. Yeah. All right, cool. And then we actually have, I hope this works, so we said, well, what if we do 2 Neuralink implants? And we've been able to do dual Neuralink implants in, actually I think 3 pigs at this point, and we have a couple of them here. And we've been able to show that you can actually have multiple Neuralinks implanted, and again, healthy and happy and indistinguishable from a normal pig. So it's possible to have multiple links in your head and have them all be sending out signals and be working well. All right. Phew. All right, so we just showed you a demonstration of reading brain activity. And let's see, probably see that. As I was saying, each of those dots represents a neural spike. And the blue chart at the bottom is showing an accumulation of neural spikes in that region. So in terms of additional brain reading activity, when we have, say, one of our pigs on a treadmill, pig on a treadmill, it's a funny concept, really. And we take the readings from the neurons, and we try to predict the position of the joints. And so we have the predicted position of the joints, and then we measure the actual position of the joints. You can see that they're almost exactly aligned. So we're able, with a wireless neural implant, to actually predict the position of all of the limbs in the pig's body with very high accuracy. Now, in terms of writing to the brain or stimulating neurons, we obviously need precise control of the electric field in space and time. We need a wide range of current for different brain regions. Some regions require delicate stimulation, some require a lot of current, and you want obviously no harm to the brain over time. And the way part of the way we analyze the stimulating neurons is with a 2-photon microscopy. I always have trouble pronouncing it, microscopy. And it's very impressive technology. You can actually literally see in real time how the neurons are firing. So the red sort of things are the neurons. The red sort of flashing things are the neurons firing. Or I should say the electrodes firing. So the red things are electrodes firing, and then the green are the neuron bodies responding to the current from the electrode. So you can see them lighting up different brain regions. And then by carefully controlling the electric field, you can actually have one electrode influence possibly 1,000 or 10,000 neurons. So although you might only have 1,000 electrodes implanted, you could be influencing millions of neurons. And this is just a similar chart showing stimulation at different power levels. So, like I said, for the initial device, it's read-write in every channel with about 1,024 channels, all-day battery life, recharges overnight, has quite a long range. So you can have the range being to your phone, I should say. That's kind of an important thing. This would connect to your phone, and actually the application would be on your phone. And it will be communicating by essentially Bluetooth Low Energy to the device in your head. That's why I say in a lot of ways it is like a Fitbit in your skull with tiny wires. So, and then like I said, you would not be able to see the device at all. You would look completely normal and just have a small scar under your hair. And we're making good progress towards clinical studies. I'm excited to announce that we received a breakthrough device designation from the FDA in July, thanks to the hard work of the Neuralink team. So I want to be clear, we're working closely with the FDA, and we'll be extremely rigorous. In fact, we will significantly exceed the minimum FDA guidelines for safety. We will make this as safe as possible. Just as with Tesla, while it is legally possible to ship a 1-star car, at Tesla, the only cars we make are 5 stars in every category. So we actually maximize safety, and we'll take the same approach here at Neuralink. And then to emphasize again, what the goal of this presentation is recruiting. We want people who are great at solving problems to join the company and help us complete this device, take care of the animals, write the software, create the chips, and productionize everything. So we need like robotics engineers. I think we also especially need people who have worked on and shipped products. So if you've like shipped a smartwatch or a phone, or any kind of complex electronics or complex device, or advanced medical devices, we'd love for you to contact us and consider working here. So, and a very important point to emphasize is that you do not need to have prior experience on brains. So a lot of people think, well, I couldn't possibly work Neuralink because I don't know anything about how brains work. And that's okay, you can learn, but we need software engineering, we need mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, like I said, chip design, robotics, and all the things that a company needs to work. So please send in your resume. Actually, it's not just engineering, obviously everything at Neuralink. So now let's actually move to questions. So we've piled questions that have been asked over the internet, and so we'll do live Q&A. So bring in a bunch of people from the Neuralink team. All right. All right, cool. All right, so if you have any questions, please submit your questions to the Neuralink Twitter account, and we will try to answer as many questions as we can over the next hour. And feel free to ask hard questions, that's no problem, and we'll do our best to answer them. All right, let's move over to the team.
Perfect. Yes, we will continue monitoring questions until the end of the event, so please keep sending them in over Twitter. Elon, do you want to come join us?
Sure.
All right, so the first question is, how is the spike detection implemented? Is it on the ASIC? Is it hardware and software updatable?
Yes. Yeah, I can answer that. So I'm Paul. I work. I've had a few different hats. I've worked a little bit on digital chip design, and more recently working on some of the algorithms trying to decode the signals from the brain. And the spike detection algorithm, there's historically been many ways of detecting spikes. Typically, people will record data offline and then look for characteristic shapes. But here, we're interested in detecting spikes online. And there's a number of simple algorithms that you can do, for example, like detecting just a threshold. And where we've been interested in doing a little bit better than that. So we actually look for particular shapes, characteristic shapes that we think are spikes. And so we're doing this on the chip. It's for all 1,024 electrodes. There's bandpass filtering that's happening on the chip. So if you think of these as like little microphones sending audio information, we're basically filtering all of that in real time and then looking for these characteristic shapes. You can configure what sort of shapes you're looking for, and that information is what's being sent out. The raw information coming from electrodes is way too much to send out over Bluetooth. So when you're seeing those beautiful spike rasters on the screen, those are the detections that we have coming straight from the chips.
Got it. And just for everyone who doesn't know, can you just explain at a basic level what a spike is?
Sure. So traditionally, people think of spikes or action potentials as the electrical events that happen in neurons and as the primary form of communication between neurons. And so this is a hysteresis event where you have currents that flow and generate this, you can think of it as being a digital signal, a 1 or a 0 that's being sent in time, where neurons will send that signal to often thousands of recipient neurons.
Awesome, thanks, Paul. So I got a question from Toby on Twitter. He asks, what can be further done to simplify the device installation progress?
So we're working on making the device as small as possible, of course, with the robot taking more and more of the responsibility away from error-prone human surgeons. We're hoping to make the process faster and safer.
Actually, it might be good for people to say, who they are and what they do.
Oh, I'm Matthew McDougall. I'm the head neurosurgeon at Neuralink.
Thanks, Matt. Is there anything specifically from the robot that can be done to make this faster and safer and scalable to billions of people?
Yeah, I guess we've started with just implementing, robot manipulating the threads. But we definitely need to expand to essentially doing the entire surgery with the robot. So there's nothing like really, as far as I can tell, fundamentally like stopping us from doing that. Sort of like at a fundamental science level. It hasn't been done in the past. I think probably just because like volumes of surgeries hasn't been needed. But specifically for us to scale up to many hundreds of thousands or millions of patients, we will need to automate like the entire surgery essentially.
Awesome, thank you, Ian. Garrett asks, what are some of the lower bandwidth activities to target first? Is it muscle movement? Is it auditory signals? What level of bandwidth is required for effective use?
So there's a couple of...
Just say who you are and what you do.
Hi, my name is Joey O'Doherty. I'm a neuroscientist and neuroengineer working on decoding from the brain. So there's some low-hanging fruit that I think can really be impactful to help many people's lives, and that's restoring movement and communication in, for example, a spinal cord injured patient. And there's a lot of antecedents in the academic world where there have been very nice demonstrations of doing this. And we think we can take our technology and really bring that to the home, something people can take home with them and improve their lives.
Fantastic. Gil, there's a fun one next. All you.
Yeah, so we're fielding questions from Twitter, so there's going to be some funny comments. First question is, who are you and what do you do? I'll lead with that. And the question is, can the Neuralink chip allow you to summon your Tesla telepathically?
Definitely, of course.
You heard it here first. That's a definite 100%. Carlos, that is the answer.
Just one bit of information.
Yeah, it's very easy. That's an easy one.
Actually, Max, this might be a question for you. Is like some of the questions we had on Twitter was how do you see the Neuralink device and the essentially API growing over time and allowing developers to interact with the device?
So there's interesting questions long term about whether you do decoding on head or on a phone or on a computer. Ultimately, so at 1,000 channels, it's possible to send all the spike data to a phone and do processing there. As this gets bigger and bigger, you're going to be more constrained by the radio, so you're going to want to push more of this on head, and that changes your programming model. But really, the APIs you're getting either bin spikes, or you're getting raw waveforms, and that's like you can consume it basically like an audio feed.
Yeah, it's worth noting, like the lossless compression of the data stream is about 100 kilobits with 1,024 channels.
Excellent. So this one came up a lot, and this particular question is from Yosef, but will this technology ever be used for gaming?
Yeah, probably.
100%.
Yeah, 100%, yeah.
I think that a good benchmark of does it work well in humans is, can a quadriplegic, does it work well enough for them to play StarCraft? I think that's a good functional target.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Awesome. We'll pull out back from the Twitter questions that are kind of funny. This is a question for the efficacy of the device. Right now, is the device limited to surface layers of the brain only, or can we go deeper? And if not now, what's holding us back from going deeper into the brain?
We are planning on modifying the device and the robot to be able to sew into arbitrary depths of the brain. Right now, we're limiting ourselves only to the cortical surface because that simplifies many of the problems involved with going a lot deeper.
And what kinds of things can you solve on the cortical surface versus when you go deeper?
Sure. So a lot of the low-level processing happens in the cortex in terms of motor intention, sensory information that comes directly in. So your hearing, your auditory percepts, your visual processing, a lot of that happens in the cortex.
I mean, you could solve blindness, you could solve paralysis, you can solve hearing, you can solve a lot with just by interfacing with the cortex. And to be clear, we actually do insert, I guess, about 3 or 4 millimeters into the cortex. So these electrodes are sensing from multiple layers within the cortex. It's that there are deeper brain systems that are underneath your cortex, like the hypothalamus, and I think that is something we'd want to interface with for sure, because that's going to be important for curing things like depression, addiction, that kind of thing, anxiety. But yeah, like I said in the presentation, overall we're aiming for a general purpose device, and really the thing that would change from interfacing with the cortex versus deep brain systems is
kind of the length of the electrode. So we just need kind of longer wires and to adjust the robot in order to access deeper regions of the brain.
Awesome. Ian, did you have
now,
anything
I'd
to
say
add?
the robot is designed, like the full length is like 7 centimeters or 8 centimeters.
Yeah, so right now we're designed for like 6 millimeters. The actuator itself isn't actually limited to 6 millimeters. It can go much deeper. That's sort of, in addition to scaling out sort of to the rest of the surgery, also scaling to deeper, which is mostly a sensing problem. So the ability to avoid deep vasculature is sort of an interesting problem that we're working on in the robotics world here. So yeah. Lots of cool problems in the robot.
And you're leading robot engineering.
Yeah, sorry, I'm Ian. I lead the robotics program here.
Robot is a man's best friend. All right, next question is, what is the most challenging problem that must be solved in order to meet Neuralink's ultimate goal?
Well, I think one of the hardest problems is kind of, I'd say, material science and especially the installation of the electrodes. What would you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, you want to introduce yourself?
So I'm Felix Deku. I currently lead the microfabrication team. My team makes up of a group of process engineers and material scientists, and our job is to make the tiny wires, as Elon referred to them, what we call the threads that are implanted in the brain. And of course, the threads are made of conductors and insulators, and choosing the right material that is amenable to the brain and compatible to the brain is something that our team have expertise on, and we work seriously on interface engineering just to make sure that our layers are actually well thought through, well designed, and at the end of the day, when we implant this device, they'll be actually functional for either reading or for writing in the brain.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be important in terms of material science problems is making sure that the threads, the electrodes, can last for decades in the brain, which is a tricky thing because it's a very corrosive environment, and you're in a dichotomy where you want to read and you want to sense electrical signals and you want to generate electrical signals, but you don't want to corrode the electrodes over time. So you need to have an insulating layer that is very robust, but also very, very thin. It has to be just the right amount of insulation, and it has to stay that amount of insulation over time. So this is why I think we think probably like a silicon carbide type insulator is probably the best long term from a material science standpoint. But silicon carbide is a tough material to work with, but that's probably the right choice long term. Would you say?
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's also, apart from its electrical properties, it also helps with adhesion between the metal layers and the polymer substrate. Other thing that we're also looking at is, since we're actually reducing the electric dimensions, the electric side, the actual side that actually speaks to the neuron, also have what we call high resistance to the signal. So we actually look into like material engineering that will reduce the impedance at that interface, so that we can actually have a very small electric side but still be able to speak clearly to the neuron.
And when you guys say thin, how thin?
How thin? So one strand of your hair is about 100 microns in diameter. We can think about dividing that into 20. So one of the thickness that we're working on is about 5 microns, and we have this possibility to go even thinner in the nearest future.
Yeah, we think we can probably go sub-micron in thickness, but obviously as the thinner you make the wire, the harder it is to sense the signal and to do stimulation, because there's less cross-sectional area for the current to traverse. In terms of upgrades, that's part of why I wanted to show the explanted pig, is to show that you can actually take the device out, and there's no observable behavior change. The pig is as happy as before, and healthy, and I think this is going to be important for upgrades, because obviously if you get an early device, then by the time, let's say you get version 1, probably by the time we have version 3 or 4, you want to upgrade. You wouldn't want version 1 of a phone and 10 years later everyone's got version 3 or 4. So it's going to be important to be able to remove the device and upgrade it over time. So over time, the Neuralink would do even more than it did before.
Awesome. So here's a question about the device. We have been talking a lot about read speeds and we haven't talked about read or write speeds. DJ, what are the read and write speeds of the device? If you think of it like a computer.
Sorry, when you say speed, what do you mean?
Like how quickly can you read information from the brain and how quickly can you write information in the brain?
Okay, so let's see. So one of the things to highlight is that
DJ, what do you work on?
Yes, my name is DJ Sa. I'm leading implant electronics development.
Like a chip design.
And a chip designer,
Yeah.
The prototype that we were showing, it has 1,024 channels. All of those channels are capable of recording and also stimulating. And in terms of recording, as Paul mentioned, we do have on-chip algorithms to do level of compression and extracting the signals of interest, in this case, spikes, neural spikes.
Sure.
And those things are actually happening at a much faster speed than your brain even is processing those information.
Well, do you want to say like things like time resolution, like within how many milliseconds can you detect a spike, and what's the just some technical data?
So in terms of the signals that we're collecting, we're digitizing them at 20 kilohertz. Generally, the signals of interest are anywhere between about a millisecond in width, and so we sort of sample it at 20 times that speed. And we have analog to digital converters that divides that into 1024 levels, so 10-bit resolution. And the spike detection is done in less than 900 nanosecond, which is really, really a fast time. And it's only sort of determined by the speed of the clock. And for making sure that our implant is low power, we're running them actually at a very slow speed. And then for stimulation, we can actually create any arbitrary waveforms with about 7 microsecond of resolution. So basically, whatever you want to draw, we can stimulate and generate those pulses through any combination of our electrodes.
And this is just version 0.9 or aspirationally version 1. As we go to version 2, 3, 4, these things will expand, I think, ultimately by orders of magnitude, many orders of magnitude.
Great. Everyday Tesla asks, how big is the Neuralink team and how much do you expect it to grow in the near future?
We're about 100 people right now. I think over time, there might be 10,000 or more people at Neuralink. So I think,
Couple orders of magnitude?
Yeah, exactly. A couple orders of magnitude. That's one of my favorite phrases. Just, a couple orders of magnitude is no big deal. Probably the number of electrodes will grow with the number of people at the company.
That's a super linear relationship.
Yeah. Well, we might need a million people at the company then. Yeah, super, yeah. Even more. Yeah. Ideally, super linear.
Our hiring quotas are determined by our channel counts.
Yeah. Maybe it's 10 to 1 ratio or something.
Yeah.
Cool. So Twitter asks, how does the implant system fare against various disturbances from the outside, like electrical, magnetic, Wi-Fi, radio?
Yeah, so the current version of the implant that we have is using Bluetooth low energy radio. So similar to any Bluetooth devices that are out there, they are able to coexist with other devices that are using and sharing our same spectrum in 2.4 gigahertz. Obviously, as you imagine, when you go to concerts or there's just a lot of people, the signal quality does degrade because it is a pretty congested spectrum. So we are actually working on some new versions of the radio that are operating at different frequencies to be able to also send out a lot more data and have it be scalable to millions of electrodes. And then also in terms of sort of electromagnetic compatibility and interferences, obviously it's very important for us to coexist with other systems and just disturbances out there. So there are also well-documented guidelines from FDA that we'll be following and doing a lot of testing for.
Fantastic. We're going to take an audience question. Fred, take it away.
So we all want to play StarCraft using Neuralink, but what are some likely first applications?
Well, I don't know if we all want to play StarCraft.
There are other games.
There are other games to play, exactly.
But also StarCraft.
So our first clinical trial is aimed at people with paraplegia or tetraplegia, so cervical spinal cord injury. We're going to enroll, we plan to enroll a small number of patients to make sure the device is safe and that it works in that case.
Yeah, so actually just to elaborate on that, if somebody is like a severe spinal cord injury, to the degree that they have very limited control even over their facial muscles, then but with this implant you can actually think just by thinking you can output words, and you can type, and you can control a computer, control a phone, and which is pretty wild. And I think something that's very exciting as a long-term application is if you can sense what somebody's trying to do with their limbs, what they want to do with their limbs, then you can actually do a second implant that's at the base of the spine or wherever, just after wherever the spinal injury occurred, and you can create a neural shunt. So I think long-term, I'm confident that long-term it will be possible to restore somebody's full body motion. So if somebody even has a severed spine, they will be able to walk again. They will be able to use their hands. And like when you have a severed spinal cord, you essentially have broken wires. And so if you can just jump over those wires and transmit the signals over those wires, you can give somebody the ability to walk again, naturally.
So DJ, you talked about outside interference. Can anyone talk about the inside interference? So how to protect the implant from the body?
Sure, I can talk about that. My name is Robin. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I lead the implant mechanical packaging and assembly team. So actually making the devices and designing the seal. So yeah, the body's not a friendly place to be. So what we do is basically create an accelerated test chamber that can mimic the conditions that the devices will see in the body, and basically test the devices at as fast as accelerated rate as we can. At this time, we're limited temperature-wise by some of the electronics components, but basically we can test subsystems to mimic the environment in the body, and by that we've brought some devices in the tester right now to almost a year, and all the implanted ones prior to these implants, we had tested the same architecture in the tester to validate it. And yeah, so there's obviously chemical things attacking the implant. There's pressure, there's mechanical shock and vibration. So all of these things are part of it. And yeah, I think one of the things that really helps is having everything insourced in-house. So we have the capability to deposit thin layers of metal. We have the capability to weld glass and machine micron scale with lasers. And yeah, so basically we have all the tools in-house to be able to design any sort of sealing, enclosure, packaging that we need to do.
Awesome, thank you, Robin. Another question from Twitter, will you be able to save and replay memories in the future?
Yes, I think in the future you will be able to save and replay memories. I mean, this is obviously sounding increasingly like a Black Mirror episode, but well, I guess they're pretty good at predicting. But yeah, essentially, if you have a whole brain interface, everything that's encoded in memory, you could upload. You could basically store your memories as a backup and restore the memories. Then ultimately, you could potentially download them into a new body or into a robot body. The future is going to be weird.
Cool. So I can't help but notice that the pigs back there are pretty well behaved and pretty darn cute. Can anyone talk about, I'm looking at Autumn over here. First, can you tell everyone who you are and what you do here? And can you describe, like, how are they so well behaved and so smart?
Well, I'm Autumn, and I lead our animal care program. And our philosophy here is to set up a system where the animals are able to volunteer, to make choices, to participate in our projects. As you see, sometimes they choose not to participate, and that's okay. We want to make sure that our animals are happy and healthy. So all of the behavioral research that we do is led by positive reinforcement. And again, that allows for them to choose to volunteer or not.
Sam's also on our animal care team. Sam, do you have anything to add to that?
Hi, I'm Sam, one of the veterinarians here, work closely with Autumn, taking care of the animals. And yeah, it's just emphasizing what Autumn said, the whole animal care program here, in fact, the whole company here is very dedicated to promoting the care of these animals. Everybody's involved, everybody's very interested in making sure that they're taken care of. And yeah, the program from top to bottom is designed to make sure that they can express their species-specific behaviors, choose to do things. We don't force things upon them as much as possible. And yeah, that's why you see the pigs happily rooting around the straw right now and generally being very content.
They do have those natural little smiles on their faces, which is ever delightful. Next question is, what programming language are you guys using for developing the device?
Several. Yeah, we use several different types of programming languages. So for chip development, a lot of Verilog for doing low-level programming at the kind of the register transfer level. As you go up higher and higher, there are various C, C++, Python. But to be honest, like at the end of the day, it's not which programming language do you know how to use. It's do you know the principles behind coming up with just methods to enable these systems to work. So I think if you have any experience in programming and you've been building things since you're little, you should really come join us.
Yeah, but can I play Crisis?
Eventually.
It can play Crisis.
Cool. Crisis confirmed. And then Ian, what about Ian, what about the robot? What kind of programming languages and tech stacks are you using over there?
Sort of just reiterating what DJ said, sort of doesn't matter. Like specifically for us, there's a real-time low-level platform, C++, some Java and Python scripts. But really, those are more just like pragmatic choices to essentially optimize for getting productive work done. So it doesn't really matter what your background is or necessarily what the tools you use are. It's more just can you accomplish things really quickly.
Awesome. This next question is from This Is Rex. They're wondering, can this device be used to explain consciousness? In the long term, of course.
I can certainly shed some light on consciousness.
So, this is a really interesting question. I think the answer is yes. And I think one of the reasons that consciousness is so hard is because, like anything in physics, you're looking at a mapping from X to Y, where X is the neuronal correlate, it's the thing that's happening then physically, and then Y is this phenomenal state. And historically, we've been unable to observe the neuronal correlates very well, and unless it's in you, we've been unable to observe the phenomenal state. So as soon as neuroscientists are able to personally get these tools where they can see the correlates and they can have the experience, I think the hard problem will vanish very quickly.
What I find remarkable is that the universe started out as quarks and leptons, we'll call it hydrogen, and then after a long time, well, what seems like a long time to us, the hydrogen became sentient. It gradually got more complex, and then but we're basically hydrogen evolved, and somewhere along the way that hydrogen started talking and thought it was conscious.
I like the joke that it turns out that if you bombard Earth with photons for long enough, it'll emit a Tesla.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Just basic science, guys.
Yeah.
It's just
they teach you in school. So there's a lot of Twitter comments coming in about a question that I think is on everyone's mind, no pun intended. What is the security of the device look like? What kind of precautions are being taken, and what does the future look like for the security of the system?
So first and foremost, privacy and security are top priorities at Neuralink. especially given the sensitivity of the data that we're collecting. And one of the things that we're ensuring is to make sure that a lot of the interactions with the brain data is going to be encrypted and authenticated properly. And I think this has been kind of a sort of recurring theme, but one of the things that we have the ability to do at Neuralink is that we work on every layer of the product, from chip design to source code, and it really gives us a unique opportunity to embed security as part of our design from the get-go, and to make sure that there are no single points of failure. So as an example, we can actually completely isolate sensitive modules like the BLE radio by just segregating it out at the hardware level, and really making sure that we protect the I/O to the brain away from any potential attacks, and really minimizing the attack surface. And we have in-house security expertise, and we're also working with external parties to do audits and perform penetration testing.
Excellent. Thank you, DJ.
Actually, is there a point that anybody here wants to make that has not been asked in a question, but you think should be a question? Anyone? Yeah.
So hey, I'm Zach. I work on the microfabrication team. I help making implants. And one thing that I think is really cool, just in general, is that this is a platform essentially, so we can change the design up in a variety of ways. So if we find that a certain design or electrode size or number of electrodes works better in different areas of the brain, we have the capability to do that. I personally think that's very cool.
Fantastic. Anyone else? Dan, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's allowed us to make such fast progress in the last few months is the use of pigs as a model. And we started out choosing pigs because of the very similar anatomy of their skull to humans, same thickness and similar kind of membrane, dural membrane. But then as time went on, we realized that pigs are actually have amazing other properties. You can train them to walk on treadmills, you can train them to do all kinds of tricks, and also that they have this large representation of the snout in the cortex, which you can very easily stimulate. So the question would be, why are we using pigs? And I think we've even surprised ourselves at how useful they are as a model in this respect. And another important point is that it's very easy to keep pigs happy. They have very low needs, and so we can build an environment in which they have amazingly good welfare.
Yeah,
Seem very happy about food.
Yeah, it's easy to make pigs happy. Basically, they love food. Pigs really love food. This is a true thing about pigs. Give them sort of some straw and some things to play with, and some friends to hang out with, and good food, and they're happy as pigs. Pigs are actually quite similar to people. So that's if we're going to figure out things for people, then pigs are a good choice. And they're quite robust creatures, like little tanks. And then I think one of the questions was is the device itself robust? And it's like, well, pigs, they bustle around quite a lot, and they bump into things, and they headbutt each other at times, and they're pretty animated. So if the device is lasting in the pig, as it lasted there for 2 months, and still going strong, then that's a good sign that the device is robust for people.
Fantastic. One common theme that's been coming up a lot on these Twitter questions coming in is that of availability. And so Matthias has a specific question on this, which is any estimate of how much it will cost at launch and what price it will reduce to over time?
I think at launch, it's probably going to be, I would say that's not really representative, because at first I think it's going to be quite expensive, but that price will very rapidly drop. And I think over time we want to get the cost obviously down as low as possible. But I think inclusive of the automated surgery, I think we want to get the price down to a few $1,000s, something like that. And I think that's possible. I think it should be possible to get it similar to LASIK, and then the device electronics itself, I think will not be very expensive, because it actually does use a lot of the parts that are made in extremely high volume, in tens of millions of units for smartphones and smartwatches and wearables in general.
Great. So here's another question about the device. What does the architecture look like? Is it a CPU, ARM CPU? What's going on inside the device that you could talk about, DJ?
I could talk a little bit about the digital architecture. It's fully custom. One of the most difficult challenges, I think, of building an implant is the energy density. So the more electrodes you record from, the more energy you're going to be consuming. And so there was nothing commercial out there. So there's an analog front end that's able to amplify these really small signals, like microvolt range, so that we can actually digitize them. And then take those signals and then find exactly what we're looking for. And there was nothing out there that could basically do those two things. And so that's why we had to build a full custom ASIC. And so there's really, there's nothing out, like it out there. It's designed specifically to record signals from the brain, and anything else would just be wasting energy.
Yeah, so the thing that I would add to that is, so there are obviously elements that we customize from ground up, like our neural amplifiers and some of the algorithms that we develop, but a lot of the other systems around it are really borrowing from parts that are already been productionized and available from the wearables industry. So BLE radio, a lot of the low power microprocessors that are part of it, a lot of small sensors. So there are obviously the neural sensors that we're developing that gives us kind of a unique data set for our applications, but really a lot of that is getting packaged up and, just not really resisting the industry that's been sort of been laid out to really create these devices with very short amount of time.
So here's another question about the integrity of the device, more from a mechanical perspective. So you're replacing a piece of bone and replacing it with an implant. And then the person is going to take that home. How does the integrity of the device fare compared to, I don't know, bone or something similar?
Sure. Well, I think Matt's probably replaced a lot of pieces of skull with plastic and other materials. So I don't know if you can talk about some of those. But yeah, basically, I mean, we know that what the mechanical properties of bone are, and we know what the stresses on the device are going to be. So it's fairly easy to just go from first principles and design for any condition that it might see.
I mean, as you can see from the pigs, as I was saying earlier, the implants are obviously very robust because pigs move around vigorously, they roll around, they bang into the wall, they bang into each other. They do like headbutting, and way more than people do. Well, sure. But it's not like the pigs are just walking around very delicately. They're high energy creatures, and I think it's clear that the implants are, have been going for a few months, still going strong, despite a lot of vigorous activity from the pig. And it's difficult. You can't just explain to the pig, hey, you've got an implant in your head, why don't you take care of it? So it's got to be robust against a lot of head impacts, essentially. So I think maybe one of the things that isn't super obvious is that the implant itself is attached to the skull, but the electrodes have long threads, so you can have quite a lot of movement, relative movement between the brain and the skull, without putting attention on the electrodes that are inserted in the cortex. So, well, let's see. With that, maybe a couple more questions, or if anybody wants to make some comments, and then we'll call it a day.
So I just want to add to what you just said. So the thread is actually also in the brain, also because of their thinness, they're actually very flexible. And so as the pig is moving around and banging their head, the threads actually move with the brain, even the normal pulsation of the brain, and that help minimize stress within the brain tissue also. And that has a long-term impact on the functionality of the device.
Zach, how long are the threads?
Well, right now they're about 43 millimeters, but like I said, it's tunable. So if we want to hit deep brain regions or some other brain area, we totally can do that.
Just to follow up on what Felix said about the threads moving around with the brain, I mean, that's great for protecting the threads, but it equally serves to protect the tissue around it. We have a lot of different ways to image the tissue around the threads and iterate very quickly on doing things to them that will improve the overall biocompatibility.
As a closing question, I thought we might go down the line, starting with Dan. And what I'm wondering is, what is the number one thing on your wish list that you're really hoping that the Neuralink device will do over time that you're working towards?
So my background is in visual neuroscience, and one of the things I think has great potential for the Neuralink is to provide a visual prosthesis for people who have retinal injury or blindness through eye injury. You can essentially plug a camera directly into the visual cortex and stimulate with an enormous array of thousands or maybe tens of thousands of electrodes to recreate a visual image. And in time, perhaps you can use that same technology in people who haven't lost vision to produce some kind of heads-up display, something like Terminator or something like that.
Wonderful.
In fact, it's worth saying that, like, over time, we could actually give somebody supervision. Like, you could have, like, ultraviolet or infrared, or see in radar. You could basically name your frequency. You can just dynamically adjust the sensor, or have sensors that feed into the visual cortex across a wide range of frequencies, and actually have superhuman vision.
Yeah, so for me, telepathy. So I think it's incredible amount of effort to put your thoughts into a set of words, and it comes out completely compressed. So being able to do that seamlessly without being able to compress it with all of the mechanisms would be great.
Yeah, it's like just I'm sorry to add further to that. In fact, when I did the Wait But Why article, I think Tim thought I said consensual telepathy, but I said conceptual telepathy. I would presume it would be consensual, because you definitely don't want just people, sending stuff into your brain without your consent. But a lot of our brain thought capacity goes into compressing our thoughts into words. And then you think of like the data rate of words. Words are very slow, very low data rate. And we're putting a tremendous amount of mental energy into compressing the concepts and thoughts in our head into words, and then slowly talking. Speech is so very, very slow. And we could actually send the true thoughts. We can basically have far better communication because we can convey the actual concepts, the actual thoughts, uncompressed to somebody else.
So non-linguistic, consensual, and conceptual telepathy.
Yes, exactly. Non-linguistic, consensual, conceptual telepathy.
There we go.
Yeah, I've actually been excited from the beginning, sort of about the side benefit of these devices. I sort of see them as essentially like an oscilloscope to a printed circuit board is our device to the brain, where just by virtue of having us in there and being able to see what's actually going on, you'll end up learning a ton about how the brain works. And so sort of augmenting people, but also just using that to learn a lot more about neurological diseases is really exciting to me.
Absolutely.
So to sort of follow up on Elon's thought, I feel, and I imagine a lot of other people feel the same way, that there's a lot of sort of trapped creativity in your mind. You can, for example, close your eyes and conjure up like an incredible, like Dali-esque scene. But if I wanted to actually show someone that, it would take years of honing a craft to be able to paint that. And so, potentially with enough electrodes in the right places, you could begin to sort of tap into those raw concepts or thought vectors and be able to decode that and show people. It could be for, art, you imagine music, or even for like engineering, like a three-dimensional model. And
So mental artistry is a new field.
I like to think about ways to interface devices with biology better. And so one of the things I'm looking forward to is getting this thing to be less like technology and more like biology, so that it really is seamlessly interfaced with the brain, stable for a very long time. And then similar to that, having stimulation be much more precise and multidimensional, such that eventually the brain sort of doesn't really know if it's being stimulated from outside or inside, and you end up just sort of completely merging.
Wow.
Yeah, following up on stimulation, one of the things our device can do is simultaneously read and write on every channel, stimulate and record. And that's, both a more challenging problem than it may seem like at first, but also, incredibly exciting at the sort of the vistas that it opens up. I mean, it's really kind of the whole game in terms of interfacing with the nervous system, and I'm very excited to use that.
Yeah, I'm excited just because of the scalability of the device. We're doing everything in-house and all of it can scale to more channels, more brain regions, etc. I think, yeah, I'm really interested about solving things related to anxiety or depression or even like removing fear. Like I'm an athlete and to like rock climb without fear would be pretty
Maybe you need a little bit of fear.
just a little. And also it'd be great if we could make the pigs fly, but
I think we have an incredible opportunity to limit human suffering to a tiny fraction of what it is today in all kinds of different avenues. Pain being the essence of suffering. We might be able to control that finally. And there's so many other diseases, so much other suffering in the world. I think the Neuralink device could help a lot with.
I think all these things are great functions for a Neuralink. I think on a species level basis, I think it's going to be important for us to figure out how we coexist with advanced artificial intelligence, and I think achieving some kind of AI symbiosis where you have an AI extension of yourself, like a tertiary layer above the limbic system and cortex, and having that symbiosis be good, such that the future of the world is controlled by the combined will of the people of Earth. I think that's obviously going to be the future that we want, presumably, if it's the sum of our collective will, and so I think it's going to be important from an existential threat standpoint to achieve a good AI symbiosis, and that's what I think might be the most important thing that a device like this achieves.
I have, in many ways, a very basic science interest, which is I'm really interested in the nature of consciousness. And there's a lot of very silly philosophy that's been written about it over the last 1,000 years. But I think that we've been very limited by the tools and our ability to interrogate and measure the brain. And as these tools get better, it will pull it into the realm of physics. And it's really one of the last big, great mysteries in science.
So for me, can you imagine a disease-free future? A future where you know what's going to happen to you before it happens, so you can prevent it. With these devices, we'll be able to not just pick up electrical signals, but we can also pick up chemical clues in the brain. And if you're successful, which I know we are, we'll be able to kind of prevent ahead of time, diseases. And really, the functionality of this device is widespread. So I'm looking forward to the future.
I'm really excited about the opportunity to help people overcome challenges that they face through life circumstances, bad luck, through no fault of their own, spinal cord injury, brain disease, some devastating things that completely change your life. Hopefully we can help them get some function back.
I know and love many humans with autism spectrum disorder, so I'm really interested to see how the Neuralink might be able to support them if they chose to do that.
Yeah, so I mean, everyone else along the line has had amazing ideas and suggestions, and for me, it's about memories, and everyone loses those memories over time. I already can't remember what happened to me when I was younger, and it'll only get worse. And so, having a repository of memories that you can access whenever you want. If you're feeling down, you can go access some good memories. If you miss something or miss somebody, you can go and access those memories. And I think that would just be such a life-changing experience to be able to just tap into that.
Those are such a beautiful and diverse array of answers there.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. And as I said, please consider working at Neuralink and helping us solve these problems. There's a tremendous amount of work to be done to go from here to a device that is widely available, and affordable and reliable. So please consider joining us and supporting us in our mission. Thank you very much.